I am Mike Tyson, a professional fighter. You can keep drugs out of your life and knock them out of society by saying no. Say no to drugs. My name is Mike Tyson. I am a professional fighter. Boxing is a lonely sport. The sparring, the training, and especially the road work gives me plenty of time to think. One of the things I think about most is how bad drugs are and how much they hurt people. Well, we can get rid of drugs if each of us, one by one, decide to say no. It's a small word with a big meaning. Say it. Say no to drugs.
From the Drug Enforcement Administration FBI Sports Drug Awareness Program in this station.
This was a public service announcement Mike Tyson did for the Drug Enforcement Administration to be broadcast right before his first title defense in 1987. He also did PSAs for New York State. They showed him hitting a heavy bag and then turning to the camera. The irony of all this is that while Mike was filming these spots, he was financing his friend Albert in his crack enterprise back in Brownsville. Right around the time Cuss died, Mike started giving Albert $5,000 here, $20,000 there, just so that he didn't have to work for someone else. Albert wasn't a partner, and Mike never wanted any return from his investment. Mike was just worried about his safety. Albert and Mike had grown up and robbed and stolen together. Mike didn't want him to worry if one of the dealers he was working for said, "Where's my shit?" The drug business in Brownsville in the 80s was like 1820s slavery. When you're working for these guys, your life meant nothing. If you had that man's package, you couldn't quit when you wanted to. Once you held that hand and made that deal, you were his property. Mike thought about getting Albert to come to work with him. But guys like him were just too antisocial. They didn't believe in hanging out, carrying no bag, being a yes man, kissing ass because Mike was champ. Nobody was going to be bossing him around. The only thing they knew was violence in Brownsville, even with people they love. Albert was much too hardcore to be part of Mike's entourage. He wasn't going to do a Mike Tyson, "Yes ma'am, how are you doing? May I help you?" Guys like him would get angry and they'd have no control over their emotions. So rather Mike said, "Here, you take this money." But Mike's plan didn't work. A young Turk ready to get his meat shot. Albert and a couple of Mike's other friends in 1989. They were only 20 at that time, and there was also a 16-year-old who wanted a piece of the dream. The Benz, the girls, and the status killed them. There was a lot of dying then. Mike paid for a lot of funerals. Mike did two things right away when he went back to New York after winning the title. He went up to Catskill and showed his belt off everywhere. He wore it outside for 3 weeks, sometimes even sleeping with it on. One day, Mike walked into the kitchen and told Jay Bright to come with him for a ride. There was one more person Mike wanted to show the belt to. He told Jay to drive to the liquor store, and Mike gave him some money to buy a large magnum of Dom Perignon champagne. Then he had him to Cuss's grave. When they got to his stone, they were both crying. They both said a little prayer, and then Mike popped the cork and they both took a big swig. Then Mike poured the rest of the bottle on Cuss's grave, left the empty bottle on the grass, and left. The second thing Mike did was to go down to New Jersey and deal with his mom's grave. Her boyfriend Eddie had been hit by a car and died right before the Berbick fight, and he was buried next to his mother. So Mike had both of them exhumed and put into nice bronze caskets, and then Mike bought a massive 7-foot-tall headstone for her mother's grave. So every time people came to the cemetery, they'd know that that was the Mike Tyson's mother there. Once Mike began making a lot of money boxing, he got a reputation as being a Robin Hood in the hood. People who didn't know him would make a big deal about him going back to Brownsville and giving his money away. But it wasn't like that. People who came from where he had come from had a responsibility to take care of their friends, even if it was 20 years later. So if he went away and made this money and he went back, he had to break off some for his friends who weren't doing as well. He would pick up cash from Cayton's office and divide the $100 bills into packets of $1,000. He'd usually carry about $25,000 in cash with him and would go around and distribute it to his friends when he'd see them. He'd tell them to go buy a tailored suit, and then they would go out that night. He didn't even have to know the people who he gave money to. He'd stop his car and give out $100 bills to bums and homeless people. He'd gather up a bunch of street urchins and take them to Lester's sporting goods store and buy them all new sneakers. He later found out that Harry Houdini did the same thing when he started to make it. He guessed that's what poor people who get rich real quick do. They don't feel like they deserve it.